Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, Toastmasters, honored guests. How many of us have been on a team? At some point, a team, a winning team. Anybody been on a losing team? Do we know the difference? Have we had the experience to know the difference between the two? I've been a coach for a long time. I've coached rugby at a high level, at an international level, but as well as at a schoolboy level. I'm an extremely competitive person, and I've always thought that the idea is to win. But how do we win? In my exploration of winning, I discovered that sometimes we have teams that are full of superstars, and sometimes we have teams that have what we would consider normal players or normal members. And very often, those superstar teams underperform compared to just the regular people, for lack of a better term. So what is the magic? What is the secret in the sauce that creates the environment to allow supposedly weaker teams excel and surpass larger teams, more reputed teams, teams with bigger names and bigger stars? And in that search and in that exploration, I discovered systems thinking, because I was thinking that there's something that had to be different for a team that excelled and went past what we are expecting. So how do we find that? And I looked at systems. So first of all, what is a system? Now, very simply, a system is a set of constituents that work together to have an outcome or an output of some sort. There are different types of systems. We have linear systems, we have non-linear systems, and more we are starting to understand that our world, in its increasing complexity, we are developing complex adaptive systems. So today I will look at and explain a little bit, just as a very cursory level, what is a linear system. Secondly, what is a nonlinear system? Thirdly, I'll try to explain as much as I can in the time that I have, what is the idea of a complex adaptive system. And ultimately, hopefully send you home with a point as to how our individual actions within a systems framework can have huge outcomes. So, as we've already decided that a system is a group of constituent elements that are working together for an outcome, let's look at a linear system. Now, a linear system is something that our societies, our economies, and our thought processes have been based upon over the last 100 or so years, since the advent of an industrialized economy. So in a linear system, we have an input of some sort, we'll have a process, and then we'll have an output. An input could be the raw materials that we need to build an automobile. We have our process, putting it all together, and then our output is the finished automobile. That output brings us revenue, if we're the automotive company, but it also will have something called entropy, for the technical term, but really it's waste. It's the garbage, and it's the things that we cast off to the side. It's the human cost of people mining the materials, the raw materials that we use to build the car. The deaths on the work site. The environmental degradation that takes place. In economics, we call those things externalities. They're outside of our system, and we don't worry about them. Who cares? It's external to our system. The thing about linear systems is that as well, it does not take into account the relationships between the constituent items. So what happens is, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people in this room, and my topic is on complexity. Let's say Paul's topic is on blue shoes, and Richard's is on German pretzels. Together we have a series of speeches that individually are interesting, but together really don't change too many things. So we look at the importance of each speech or each constituent element and ignore the relationship between the two. This gives us concepts of additivity and homogeneity. So additivity is that if I have two people working on one thing, then we're going to have twice as many products. If we have 5 people working on it, we will have 5 types of products. Does that make sense? Everybody understand? So that is the idea of a linear system. What goes in, we come out, we have a little bit of waste, but nothing else really goes into it. Now if we look at a team, a team of superstars, very often we have the constituent elements, but we don't have a huge outcome. Now why do we not have outcomes? Because we're not looking at things with regards to the relationship that takes place. And a nonlinear system really looks at the relationships between the constituent elements. And when those relationships interact, we get something called a feedback loop. We can have a positive feedback loop and a negative feedback loop. Now, an extremely negative positive feedback loop could be something we consider about what's happening in Syria. But not just Syria, and Middle East in general, and terrorism in general. Now, the terrorists, they blow things up because they feel that they're being persecuted by, for lack of a better enemy, the United States. So we'll blow up something that's American. The Americans respond, they react by saying, they've hurt us, we're going to bomb them. Those who have been bombed, the American evil imperial dogs have bombed us, we're going to go and blow something up there. And it creates a positive feedback. Not positive in the sense that it's a good thing, but that it continually builds until we have a crash. Negative feedback loops take us to homeostasis, to a balance. From an industrial standpoint, a negative feedback loop, or excuse me, a positive feedback loop that we could look at would be something like the amount of environmental damage that is created through the exploitation and the development of oil and gas in northern Alberta. Part of the negativity of the feedback loop is the environmental degradation. If we put in place systems that feed on the waste products, we create another feedback loop that will hopefully bring things back into balance. Going from there, understanding that it is really our relationships, the connection that we have with the people involved in our systems, that become the valuable part. Right? We understand how important it is that our simple actions, when sent into a feedback loop, can have effects that go much further. We can, in fact, be our own butterfly effect. Now, a butterfly effect became popular in that it is the idea that the flapping of a butterfly's wings on the Western Hemisphere can create a hurricane or a typhoon in the Eastern Hemisphere. But why is that? It is the complexity and the interactions of several feedback loops within several subsystems that seem disparate and separated and not connected, but in fact touch upon each other. And we are, through its interaction and its relationship. An example of a very complex system is our bodies. We have several systems within our bodies that by themselves really don't amount for much, but together give us life. It is the emergent property of life that comes through the interaction of these complex systems. So in the world, we have an economic system, we have a social system, we have environmental systems, we have ecological systems that all play a part in the health of our society. At the moment, things seem to be out of balance. I would argue that part of our issue is that we still have a linear mode of thinking. We delve down, we look at the individual aspects of things. We try to explain it by taking it apart in little pieces without understanding that all of the pieces together create something more important. Gandhi said, be the change you want to be. He also said, the future starts now. Given what's happening in the Middle East, we have a responsibility to, A, be good to the person sitting next to you, to start with. But first being good with the person inside of yourself. And understanding that those little efforts carry with it a much greater effect down the road. So we have the opportunity to be our own butterfly effect. Thank you, Toastmasters.
Thank you very much for the stunning speech. And